Good evening, folks. This is Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, and I'm your host, Representative Gary Hopper. Matt Connerton couldn't be here tonight because he's, I'm probably going to have to fire him. But I guess I'd have to hire him first. I was going to dock his pay, but he doesn't get paid, so I'm kind of in a pickle as far as how to deal with this. And it's going to be a bad night because I couldn't find my hand grenade. I did bring my cannon. So I'm kind of disheveled. I was really bummed out because right down the street used to be a Dunkin' Donuts, and they took it out of there without asking me. No. So anyway, I'm pretty, I'm just very, very upset tonight. But, you'll live. So let's see. Tonight we're talking with Elsie Petroselli and Diane Coventry McCormick. I didn't get the spelling right last time she was on, so she hates me more than she hated me before. We go to the same church, so she knows how much to hate me. She actually knows me well enough to know that she shouldn't even associate with me, but she came on. This is the second time. I thought you were sharp. Anyway, so let's see. I got to go over legislation that happened today. Now I'm going to forget what the heck. I already forgot what all these bills were. House Bill CACR. Oh, go back to this side. I write really bad notes. Yeah, CACR 12 was a constitutional amendment to fix Claremont. Claremont decision, basically the state Supreme Court interpreted part of our Constitution. Our Constitution says that New Hampshire will cherish an education, but they cherish seminaries and everything else, because the original Constitution was very intricately tied up with the church too, because they knew that the best way to have a strong society was to educate children through the church and through schools and about God and family and stuff like that. So anyway, quite a few years ago, almost 20 years ago, the state Supreme Court interpreted cherish as pay for, which is not what it meant, and you can't find a dictionary that agrees with that. So basically the courts have been legislating from the bench and forcing us to try to pay for school, which wasn't what the original intent of the Constitution was. And so we tried an amendment that was a really crappy amendment, and it failed today. So you're not going to see CACRs or constitutional amendments that will, if they pass, go onto the ballot. But you need a 60% vote in the House and the Senate, and then it goes to the ballot, and you need 60% of the voters to approve it. For it to become in the Constitution.
So what was this actually saying?
This basically almost wrote into law what the court already said, and it's pretty long, and I didn't bring it with me, so I can't recite it, but I was on the fence until that today, and I just went in there and listened to the arguments. I just couldn't support it. Let's see. CACR 6, 3/5 4. Oh yeah, there was another CACR 6 that would have required a 60% majority of the House and Senate to pass any bill that raised a fee, tax, to bond, to do anything with money. Basically, if we wanted to increase it, it would have to get a 60% majority of the House and Senate for it to go into law. We have a caller. And I got to figure out which. Matt usually does this, so if I do it badly, sue me. Hello, you're on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades.
Yeah, real quickly, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I just saw you on Channel 9 News.
Me?
They were just showing the stuff that's what happening up in Concord.
Yeah.
And they showed you, and you were looking at a paper that had a girl with a shotgun in her hand. Honest to God, they showed
That's
that.
awesome. That's
with
awesome.
You looking at this girl.
Yeah, Shotgun News. I have to study while I'm there. I got to, keep my mind going.
Yeah, I don't know why they did this, but I just wanted to bring
That's
this to
awesome.
attention. I just saw it just a few minutes ago. It's unbelievable.
That's great.
It shows a girl having a shotgun.
Yeah. That's hey,
I'll let
thanks.
you go.
Thanks, man. Good night. What?
My phone's
Uh-oh.
ringing.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
by the
turning
way,
it
you
off.
shouldn't have that on, by the way, just in case anybody didn't tell you. That is awesome. They show. I usually sit in my seat. It's an aisle seat where I look at the shotgun news, because sometimes the debates get pretty boring. And I actually can't read them because I can't see well enough to read them, but I look at, different guns and stuff like that, and apparently I was open to the picture of the girl with a shotgun. That's just terrific. So,
Sure glad that's what it was open to.
oh man, that's too great. So anyway, that failed. The constitutional amendment to get a 60% majority to increase taxes failed. The one constitutional amendment that did pass was a constitutional amendment to basically ban an income tax in New Hampshire. Now, the people out there, the audience really needs to understand this. This is really kind of a cool thing the Republicans did, because it is not in their best interest to pass this. It was not good for me politically to press the green button and vote for this today, in that by passing it, we're taking one of the things that we always run on is we don't believe in an income tax, and we're handing it to the voters, and if the voters pass it, it will be constitutional that you can't impose an income tax. So therefore, you're taking one of basically the arrows out of your Republican quiver and putting it aside in the best interest of the state, if that makes any sense. But basically, politically, it was stupid, but it was still the right thing to do. That was really cool. We also got a constitutional amendment passed today that was really good. Back, now I'm going to forget the time frame, about the 80s, we passed a constitutional amendment to allow the courts to make their own rules. Prior to that, the legislature did that. And the court argument was, well, we should be able to make the rules as to when we meet, when we do this, and when if and when a security guard needs to be there, all these rules that they have to make for their own, to govern their own branch of the government. And we said, yeah, but unfortunately, by the time it got written into the law, magically it appeared, and this shall have the force and effect of law. If you look at your Constitution, that's what it says, which has made people nervous for years, because it implies that the court has the constitutional authority to write law, which obviously is contrary to the rest of the Constitution. So we just got that. That's going to go to the voters next November too. So you got two constitutional amendments going to the voters, and it'll be up to you people to decide. I hope everybody supports them. Another one was House HB 146 passed today, and that's one we've talked about on the show, and that's called jury nullification. Jury nullification, this isn't a constitutional thing. You don't have to vote on it. It after it was amended, it in effect tells a judge that he has to let a defense attorney inform the jury as to their rights as a juror. And jury nullification is that most people don't understand when they're sitting on a jury that they have not only the right to decide whether somebody's guilty or innocent based on the preponderance of the evidence, they also have a right to decide the morality of the law itself. I don't know if you ladies knew this, but
No, I didn't know that.
I'll give you the best example of this is during the slavery times up in the north. All the churches, fundamentally, it was a fight in the churches that activated the anti-slavery movement. People would go to church on Sunday and learn that slavery was evil, and so there's a lot of people up north that were harboring slaves. Well, under federal law, they were still property. So if you, as a Christian, you were harboring one of these slaves, you could be taken to court for basically being in possession of stolen property. Okay? And under the law, you should be convicted of it if that is the case. But because of jury nullification, which is a long-standing historical variable in the courtroom that's been kind of pushed away for the last 100 years, but because of jury nullification, a jury of your peers would say, Diane's not guilty of that because it's immoral to call that person property to begin with, so therefore she was doing her moral duty to God to harbor that person and try to save them. So therefore, we are not going to convict her on the basis that the law itself is immoral. That's called jury nullification. And you have that right as a juror, but most people don't know it, so it can't be used. So House Bill 146 finally passed today, and I think it went through the Senate. And hopefully the governor doesn't veto it. And if that's the case, it'll go into law that jury nullification will be basically back on the books as the way it was intended originally. Because a jury is supposed to be the final decider of whether of guilt or innocence of people and when they're accused of a crime. So those are the highlights. Well, the real highlight is me getting my picture taken with the Shotgun News in my lap, but that's wicked funny. That is so great. I'm so glad he called because I would have missed that because I don't watch Channel 9 that often. But anyway, so we're here to talk to Diane and Elsie. And Elsie, I found out tonight, her last name's Petrocelli, and I thought it was the catcher for the Boston Red Sox, and I was wrong. It was a shortstop for the Boston Red Sox. And when I was little, he was one of my favorite, because that was the 70s, right?
Yes.
70s.
Part of the 70s.
So
I
that
was
was
just
one-
going to say, you were very young.
Yes, in the early 70s. Yeah, 70, I would have only been 12, 13.
Yep.
And I think I had the baseball card, too, that ended up in my spokes on my bicycle.
Of course.
Of course.
That's where all of them ended up.
So that's your husband.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. That's wicked cool. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. So you guys, okay, I get correct. We're negotiating on titles because that's how arrogant I am. That's all I care about is people's titles. And where did I write down what we agreed on?
Co-leaders.
Co-leaders of post-abortion ministries. And you're here in Manchester. And, there's something about abortion I wanted. I was doing some research on the Falun Gong. You ever heard about that?
Never heard of it.
Falun Gong is a religion in China. And it's basically a combination of Buddhism and Kung Fu, if you can imagine such a thing. And when they were doing the Kung Fu part, it's exercise, aerobic exercise, and learning to discipline oneself, the Chinese government was all in favor of it until they reintroduced the spiritual end of it, which is learning to control one's own morality and everything else. It's not Christian, so I'm not advocating for it. But it's just interesting listening to a guy who was talking about what's happened to those people, and it's similar to what's happening in China to the Christians. And anything that takes right now in a communist rule, fundamentally what you need is people to believe that the state is the final authority. Okay?
In a communist
In a
state.
communist state. And that's, we had a guest on last year who said that's why Poland never really took communism in that well, because it was very strong Catholic, strong families, and they never really looked to the state. So communism never really took root in Poland. But anyway, so the Falun Gong is a religious sect in China that's been persecuted, and I didn't realize this, is that they've actually taken these people, and they've done this to Christians too in China, and I don't know about the latter part, but I know that they've imprisoned people who are trying to start churches in China. And anyway, Falun Gong, they've actually taken the people and imprisoned them and then harvest their organs.
Oh. Not good.
No. And forced abortions and everything else, we know that.
Forced abortions, I knew obviously, about that, only because women, if they didn't meet their doctor's appointment, they will be sought out wherever they are, brought in and checked to see if they're pregnant. If they are, they were immediately aborted. There are no women's rights.
No,
In China.
no, there's none. So anyway, we want to talk about, I want to turn this time over to you and tell us about what you ladies do as in CareNet and stuff like that.
All right. Do you want to?
I started out with CareNet in Nashua as an assistant to the director there.
What motivated, because Diane, we've already gone this through, what motivated you to get involved in it to begin with?
Well, the original motivation was that I needed a job up here in New Hampshire. We had just moved to New Hampshire, and I left my job in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And so I went and applied for the job,
Yeah.
and a week was going to go by before I started. And I thought, I wasn't completely honest with her because I was deceptive in the fact that I hadn't told her that I'd had an abortion.
Oh, wow.
And so I called up and I said, I need to come back in and talk with you. And so I did. I went in a week later and told her this. And she said, and if you don't want to hire me, that's fine. You know, that I understand. She said, not hire you. We want you here to be able to speak to other women. And which really excited me because that's what I had wanted to do for about 37, 38 years.
Yeah.
Because after I had had an abortion, I stuffed it. You just keep stuffing everything back there and just don't talk about it, don't tell anyone, keep it a secret, lock up the shame, everything that goes with it.
Yeah.
And she said, you really need to go through a Bible study here. And I'm thinking, I've been in Bible studies for like 10 years and
Yeah.
I have all kinds of Bible studies.
Just a second. Hello? Did I press the wrong button and they hung up?
Looks like you have it.
Huh?
Looks like they're on.
Hello?
I'm hanging up.
Oh, well.
So
I can't see the button. My
Oh.
eyes aren't very
What
good.
button is it?
This one.
All right,
I see
I'll-
the button, but I can't see what it says up here.
Oh, all right.
Whatever.
So the name of the Bible study is Forgiven and Set Free. I went through the study. This is the book.
Yeah.
And that's what it did, was God forgave me and did set me free and changed my life completely. I no longer had to keep it a secret. I no longer had to walk into another room when it was mentioned. And I could say the word now without crying.
Right.
And so almost all the way through the study, I found out that at the conference that year they were going to have a special section called PACE, Post-Abortion Counseling Education.
Yeah.
I said, that's it. That's why God sent me here. That's what I want to do. I want to help other girls. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And that was in 2001.
Oh, really? That's
So we've
really
had
cool.
a lot of girls go through the program, and every one of them, or maybe two, that weren't completely forgiven. Usually that would be because they didn't do their homework.
Right.
Because the girl who wrote this, Linda Cochran, came from experience, and she wrote a Bible study like you cannot believe. I mean, it's fabulous.
It works you through your loss. And
Yeah.
the misconception out there, I think, is that people are not aware that the decision to abort, to exercise your right, let's say that the decision to exercise your right has a profound effect on you as a person, and that you walk through life in denial, burying it. This study walks you through your loss, because we don't recognize it as in our society today as a loss.
Right. It's just.
It's just a tissue that
yeah,
you're-
it's tissue.
You got
and
rid of your problem.
You got rid of
Yeah.
your problem, and now you can go on with the rest of your life, which is far more important than what you just did 20 seconds ago. And
Yeah.
what is not being talked about enough, only because, and I firmly believe that when we're in denial and we've stuffed it, we have such guilt and such shame and such remorse to have to face that remorse is scary, and you don't know how to do it because you don't know where to go to get the help. Because when you do years ago try to get help, people weren't really aware that post-abortive stress syndrome, post-traumatic stress syndrome, whatever you want to call it, they're the same. The symptoms are the same for men and for women. You know, last time I was on, we talked about gender differences in the
Yep.
but I don't believe there is. I believe women and men could have everything from the self-esteem, burying it, tightening up inside, to the aggression, anger, addictions. Both men and women. I don't think there's a
Right.
gender-specific symptom necessarily.
And Linda wrote another book called Men, for
yeah.
Healing the Father's Heart
Healing a father's heart.
for men.
Right.
And that's,
Is it also a function of the idea that, like in AA, the reason AA works as opposed to other processes is that you have other alcoholics that have already gone through it helping you walk through it?
yes, that's true.
Because if somebody that hasn't gone through it, technically they could read a manual and try to understand it, but it's not the same.
This is such a delicate topic that we're flexible enough that if a person is not comfortable sharing this deep thing in their life with others, we do one-on-one.
Yeah.
And it is encouraged to do it in a small group because you do share and you do feel more, once they're in there. Once I was in there, when I first went into the meeting, I was uncomfortable at first because I thought, this is too private. I don't want a whole room full of people.
Right.
But it was a very small, intimate group of people that shared the same experiences, and working through the Bible study, or working through this booklet, Forgiven and Set Free, walks you through all of the steps of a loss. And at the other side of this, and this is one of the things I want to emphasize, because yes, it is hard to get there. That was one of the questions you guys asked me last time, which I don't think I really answered because I got
Okay.
confused, but I'll get to that in a moment. But at the end of this study, there is a freedom. You don't have guilt. You don't have the remorse anymore. You feel so light. For me personally, the fibromyalgia is gone. I have not had a symptom since 2009.
Yeah.
And one of the questions you had asked me, or Matt asked, was how long did it take from the time that I had the abortion to coming to the reality that I needed help? Because what a lot of people do out in the world, all the society, because we bury in stuff, and we don't even remember. There were some years that I don't even remember the abortion because it's that traumatic. He had asked me how long did it take. Well, it was 27 years. 1980 I had the abortion. 27 years later, I realized that I knew I didn't deal with that properly, nor did I know how. And people were presenting themselves in front of me, not realizing they were. Shauna Amick came to our church for Sanctity of Life discussion.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
you know, that
Now,
was,
she
boom.
worked at CareNet too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I didn't
Shauna
realize
worked,
that
yeah.
at the time, but
Yeah.
she was coming in and talking to our church. Well, it was 2 years after that I finally had the courage, and this takes a lot of courage for a woman, or a man, I think, but for a woman to go up and say, I need help. And that's all I could do. Then I put the hand up and said, that's it. That's all I could do. That's all I could tell you. And then 2 years later, I finally went into this Bible study.
Wow.
Because that's how delicate it is.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
how painful it is to face that decision. I don't think legislature really knows, in my opinion, how hard it is on a humanistic perspective to deal and face with that regret from that decision.
Yeah, I know. 'Cause didn't we have a bill earlier this year? I think it probably died about, or I think it got watered down about what was it? Informing.
Oh, underage,
yeah,
informing
informing-
parents.
Consent.
No, it wasn't underage. It was basically. It'd be just like if you took a medication, there'd have to be a label on there to say if you take this, you might get heartburn, et cetera, et
Risks
cetera.
involved.
Yeah.
And we had legislation in to require that women be warned as to the post-traumatic stress, the probability of increased chances of breast cancer, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it got killed or watered down so much that it wasn't as
They usually do.
yeah, because it's you've got a whole group of people up there who basically vote against anything relative to abortion, regardless of what it is.
And I think that's one of the reasons I feel strongly, and I know Elsie and I have talked a little bit about it, and we've come together on this, is bringing awareness and educating people on the real reality of it. I had wrote this thing called The Truth Be Known, and one of the things I wrote down was it's not necessarily changing or having legislature change, it's about changing minds by talking about it. Legislature will change if all of our minds have changed on it.
Yes, maybe.
Well, I'm not saying not fight in legislature, but
I've just been up there a long time. I get a little jaded. It is so difficult.
I
up
just
there.
want awareness that people are hurting.
Yep.
If there have, in 39 years since 1973, there's 39 years of approximately 1.5 million abortions a year. That's 1.5 million women. But then there's the other half. Then there's the men. So you have 1.5 million men. We're all walking wounded. We're all hurting and don't know how to handle it.
Right.
And it comes out.
Yeah.
And
It'll
it's really
always
got to
come out.
be a lot more than that, because it was 40 million when I started running the classes, and now it's who knows.
Over 58 million.
Plus, a lot of them have never been reported.
Right.
But the thing that I love about this study is that it's post-abortion. And I'm able to talk to girls who have gone through this and help them get through it. And I'm just a leader. God
Right.
does the healing. He
Yeah.
does the forgiving. And that's what's important about this study.
Right.
There's a piece on one of the front pages here it's just a paragraph. The Bible study was formed out of a personal desire to see women freed from the bondage of guilt and grief that follows an abortion.
Wait,
Not-
I want to stop there just a second. So the audience can identify with this. I had a conversation with my son when he was kind of little. He had done a bunch of things wrong. I figure he's just had one of those weeks where he just he burnt himself with a lighter from the truck and did all kinds. He just every time I turned around, he was doing something wrong. And I said, when you did something wrong, did you look forward to me coming home from work? He goes, no. And I said, it's the same kind of thing that you're dealing with, because in an abortion, you've done something, even though you're convinced or told that it's just getting rid of flesh, in your heart you know that you're doing something egregious, and that guilt separates us from God,
Right.
because we don't want to face Him. And it's
Right.
just like a child doesn't want to face dad when he comes home from work if he's been doing things wrong all day, because he knows it's not going to be a good thing.
Right.
And,
Right.
and so anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring that kind of home a little bit.
Well, this really addresses the differences. Not all women are affected in the same manner. And now this is Linda Cochran talking. I realize there are women who seemingly have no regrets about choosing abortion and who have no apparent signs of physical or psychological side effects. This Bible study was prepared for the women who have experienced some degree of remorse or regret. When a woman has a miscarriage, she doesn't stay in guilt and shame and all those things because she didn't choose it.
Right.
When a woman has an abortion, you're left with that guilt until you can get rid of it. And we can't forgive ourselves. I think it's impossible. I mean, I think you need to go to God. Right, humanly impossible. You go to God with it, and you find out through this study the holiness of God and the character of God, and that opens the door wide for the rest of the study. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, this God who is that holy and who says all the things that God says in the Word is going to forgive me and take it away and throw it as far as the east is from the west, all those things that we learn in the Word, which is incredible to me. I mean, once I knew that, then I knew I was set free.
Was there a chasm between when you knew it technically, in other words, reading it, and accepting it?
Not a
Because
chasm, no, because it happens so fast. And I love this study because we watch girls come in, they're in tears. They're in tears for half of the study, and all of a sudden they come in one night and their whole demeanor has changed.
Yeah.
Because that's God's healing.
That must be awesome.
It is awesome. And I just feel privileged to be able to lead it. I mean, I'm not a teacher, not by profession or anything. And I thought, at first I thought, am I going to be able to do this? But it's easy to lead this study because Linda's done all the work. And it is so right on. It's gone around the world. It's written in how many different languages
Oh, I
now?
forgot how
13,
many.
14 different
Yeah.
languages. And
And then she wrote the one for men,
yeah,
which I would love to see somebody take a hold of that and do a full ministry on that. I don't know how many people. I know there is I know there are a group of men that have gone through this book. I just don't think it is as widely known for men as it is for women. And for some reason, in my mind, I just want to make sure that a man gets recognized that he can find healing as well as a woman. And
yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's not. Guys aren't really good at talking about stuff anyway.
no,
Right.
they're
know?
designed. The books are designed to walk you through it specifically for this sin.
Right. Well, if a guy had been involved in something like that, I'm not even sure he'd
Fess
Well,
up.
fess
Well-
up, much less
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, talking about the stress involved. We have a gentleman at our church, Henry. He is such a sweet old guy, but he still suffers from post-traumatic stress from
Oh, the war.
World War II.
Yeah.
Whoa.
There's still stuff that he cannot talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's kind of the same thing. It's different, but it still stresses the soul out and hurts the soul so profoundly that it's so stained from what you've
Right.
seen and what you've gone through that it's hard to
It
rise above
really,
it.
it really is a trauma. And my abortion was before.
Just a second, please.
Yep.
Hello, you're on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades.
Hi, yes, I'm calling about this topic there. I just want to say that myself am very happy to see this topic covered. I consider myself a genuine Christian progressive pro-lifer. I was just kind of wondering about the opening statement regarding the income tax and how you were saying that you believe banning the income tax entirely was the right thing for the legislature to do. As a pro-lifer, I would think that that would be something that we might need to keep on the table in order to provide the necessary resources for pregnant women if we wish to get the government involved to try to change the hearts and minds of people and eventually end abortion within the nation. So I'm just wondering, where the thinking of that came when you were saying that.
I'm not sure I
Can
get
I-
the question. You get it?
Can I answer that?
Okay, thank you. We'll answer it in a second, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
We aren't really here to talk about the politics of abortion.
Right. No, I know
We're
you're
here,
not.
yeah. So we're here to talk about the forgiveness of abortion and how women can be forgiven, how they can walk
Right.
through this.
Right,
and-
but you're asking me specifically why I was in favor of getting rid of an income tax as it relates to abortion because there won't be enough money to pay for what?
Well, I was saying that from the political perspective, I mean, I would think we would need to keep something like that on the table because down the road, I think if we were going to provide the resources, provide the health care necessary to provide for these poorer women there who have these children there that need to be cared for and throughout childhood and adulthood, I would think that ultimately, even even in this libertarian state there, that income tax and obviously an expansion of welfare would need to be something to kept on the table.
Okay, I get it.
I'm just saying, when you say that, it seems like kind of in a sense, almost a contradiction to the nature of, I guess, the message.
Okay, I get it now. We're really not talking about that tonight, but in effect, what happens, the more taxes that government takes in, what it ends up actually doing is enabling people. If you had enough money to provide for all the women that were having children out of wedlock, and you gave them a nice home and a car and all this, what you would really end up with is a lot more women having a lot more children out of wedlock.
Right.
Because in a good example,
Well, ultimately, I mean, in a way, is that inevitable? Because, I mean, when we have pregnant women and pregnant girls, I mean, we want them to have the child. I mean, because even if they may...
correct, yes, I get that, but what happens in practical sense, regardless of how much money we throw at it, we would still end up with abortions, and we would still end up with the requirement for more money, because there would be more people needing those services. The best way to look at this, to me, is if you have two children at home, and one of them is getting Fs, and the other one's getting A's, and the one that's getting Fs, you say, well, you really need some help. I'm going to give you $100 for every F you get. The kid that's getting A's, you say, well, you're getting A's, you don't need any help. Nice job, have a good day. Well, the kid that's getting A's is going to go, hey, wait a second. And so what you end up with is a system with more dependency, and so an income tax doesn't solve that, it only exacerbates it.
Okay,
So I think you
see what you're
increase
saying, but it's kind of like a delicate line, I guess, there, because obviously, I mean, from what you were saying, you would want the government to get involved in some way, right?
No, I didn't say that.
No,
No, that's not what we said. We said that we were trying to pass legislation to require that women who were getting abortions were informed as to the possible side effects, such as what the ladies are talking about, which is the post-traumatic stress. That's not a financial thing. That's just a piece of paper that they get if they're as information before they get an abortion, so they understand that it isn't just flesh, and that when they do get the abortion, if they get the abortion,
There's
the
side
likelihood that they're going to go through post-traumatic stress and other issues and have with that, if they're not informed, they can't deal with them because they don't even know that they're having them sometimes, and later on, they're ashamed that they have them and don't understand that there's other people that went through it also. So
Right,
that was the legislative part of it. It wasn't a financial issue.
Okay.
Okay?
So I guess I'm just acknowledging that. In some sense, I mean, I guess married women below the income scale would need some sort of health care now that is not necessarily provided now in order to, I guess, care for the child before and after birth. So I guess that's not a message I hear as much from people who claim to be pro-life. So I guess that's...
Oh, I get you. Yeah. Oh, I understand. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, that's a common thing is people who are legislators who are pro-life like me, they say, well, why aren't you spending money to support all these women who want to have children?
That's where CareNet comes in.
Yeah, CareNet is actually a nonprofit that does support those children, and to me, that's the way to do it, because when government gets involved, you end up with dependency. So
Right.
more and more people are dependent. If you really wanted to help children, I'll give you a really good example of how screwed up the system is if Diane has a child out of wedlock, the state will help. Or at least this is the way it used to be. If Diane has a child out of wedlock and is married, the state doesn't want to help. So what does that do? That says we have. If you look at what's happened to the poorer
Well,
families, in
it
this,
helps. Government is helping families to stay apart because you get more money if you're not married.
right? The war on poverty started in the 1960s. Even though they knew that this wasn't the problem. The war on poverty did more to destroy the family, because it said, look, if you have a child out of wedlock, we're going to give you X number of dollars. If you have 2 children, we'll give you this much dollars. We'll give you, a place to live and so much money for food.
Right.
If your husband comes back or your boyfriend comes back to live with you, you're losing everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? And that combined with the change in the marriage laws, you ended up with, prior to Daniel Patrick Moynihan did the Moynihan report for President Johnson. In that report, he said the biggest problem with the quote-unquote Negro family was the breakdown of the family, because 25% of them were in broken or single homes. They had the war on poverty combined with the ease of divorce by no-fault divorce. By the year 2000, in Washington, D.C., 75% of those children were brought up in single or broken homes. In this past year, and this is kind of explaining to the caller, this past year, more black children were aborted in New York City than were born.
Wow.
That's so sad.
And it's a function of the breakdown of the family, because as the family breaks down, promiscuity increases.
Right.
Women are seeking, young girls are seeking basically the affection they should have gotten for their father, that
Right.
love that they should have gotten from their father, in inappropriate ways, and they become more promiscuous. Boys don't have a father to show them what it means to be a man and to be responsible.
Right.
So,
Leadership.
yeah, they don't have that.
makes me want to talk about politics, because that goes back to the fact that the school systems won't let anyone come in and talk about abstinence.
No.
I don't know if this generation even knows what abstinence is.
No, this generation doesn't know anything about self-restraint.
No.
It's all about
And
whatever
what a
feels really,
shame.
really good right now.
That's what Shauna Amick used to do with CareNet, and spoke at many different schools. And I wish everyone could hear someone like Shauna speak, because the kids sit like, they're tuned in.
Yeah.
After I
really
went
are.
through this and started leading groups, I went back to the school that I had worked at in Massachusetts and spoke at the chapel program at that school.
Yeah.
And the kids hung on every word.
Yeah.
And this is what they need
They're
to
looking
hear.
for guidance.
Of course
are.
they are.
They're not looking for condoms. They're looking for guidance.
It's okay
Right.
to say no to sex.
Yeah,
and
it's
it's not
it's okay.
shameful to say no.
Yeah.
No.
And when they don't, and they end up having an abortion, they end up having all the problems that we're speaking about. I mean, it's not cut out the way that they're making it sound like it is.
No.
When a woman is pregnant, she's pregnant with a baby.
Right.
And when they take that away, there's a consequence left. And that's undeniable. I mean, that's just the way it is. There's a consequence left there. And until she's forgiven by God, there's going to be a problem.
And it'll come out in all kinds of health issues.
Exactly.
Health issues or emotional issues or inability to, if she does get married, to actually be attached to her husband,
Well, yeah,
and all
there's
kinds of.
the symptoms.
Well, usually,
But yeah, what are some of the?
Some of the symptoms. Well,
You
you
have to get
know.
closer to the mic, hon.
Oh, I do. You were talking a little bit about being informed. When you go to the doctor and you need a prescription or you need some sort of medical treatment, the doctor's going to inform you if you're going to have surgery, what's entailed, and what side effects or risks. And when you watch television, the advertising for prescriptions have this long list of side effects. And can you imagine if you were, prepping for an abortion and the doctor says to you, you may experience depression, bouts of uncontrollable sobbing, infection, increasing your chances of future miscarriages and sterility, increased chances of future ectopic pregnancies, and possibly damaged cervix, nightmares, sometimes hearing babies cry, suicidal ideation and attempts. You may attempt suicide. Self-destructive behavior, such as eating disorders, bouts of anger and violent outbursts. You may experience the inability to bond with future children, substance abuse, loss of self-esteem, sexual dysfunction. And it goes on. I mean, could you imagine if a doctor said, You may have, these are the risks involved in an abortion. Would you still want that abortion?
That's a good question, but by the same token, at least you would understand when those symptoms started rearing their ugly head.
Yeah.
If you started having the nightmares, you would say, well, they warned me this could happen, and you might seek help.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
Being informed.
you can't have millions and millions of women going around wounded, basically like wounded warriors,
Right.
not understanding that there are consequences to what they have,
That
decisions
their
they
depression
made.
is linked to that decision, that their
Right.
eating disorder is linked to that decision. That's the awareness that I would hope to bring out there.
Right, and once they realize the connection, then they can start looking for help to try to, like you say, go through a program like this at CareNet to start the forgiveness process.
Well, there's-
Because
Right.
Yes, and there's also, for example, and I know.
now, before we run out of time, can we make sure we go through some of the other services you provide at CareNet?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
Because
she was
it's
just
not
gonna
just
get
for girls who have had abortions.
No, CareNet provides education to women, married or unmarried, with their first child, and you can tell
They
them
teach
more.
them before they have the baby. They give them lessons each week that they come in, and then they earn mommy bucks, and that's how they pay for things. So that's teaching them responsibility. It's teaching them what's going to happen when they have their baby, when they're pregnant, and
Right.
all the things that are going to happen to their body and so forth. And then after they have the baby, they will walk a girl through that for 2 years until the baby's 2 years old.
Wow, that's
It's
a really
fabulous.
crucial time too.
And it's a fabulous program.
Yeah.
I mean, they're helping those mothers who probably never thought about being a mother, how to take care of a baby, how to be a mother, how to raise them. I mean, it's not a set in stone. I mean, they're not saying, if you don't do it just like this. But,
Right.
But it's all the things that they need to learn before they have a baby.
Yeah, 'cause
and
a
It
lot,
takes the pressure off of them,
Right.
too. They feel so relieved when they hear, yes, you can give your baby water.
Right.
There's
And ice
questions
cream.
that
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah, of course.
right,
Everyone has to have ice cream.
right. I know. I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, my granddaughter's almost 9 months old now.
Oh, that's great.
She's wicked cute.
If you don't say so yourself.
But
We had four sons.
So I'm walking with my six-year-old grandson yesterday, and he's on a stone wall next to me. And we're walking along. He says, "Papa," says, "Do you know you got a bald spot on your head?" The thing is, he's so young, he doesn't understand how adversely that's going to affect what he gets for his birthday. But anyway, but there's a lot of stuff with little kids you don't even think of, and it's nice
Right.
because years ago, back in the day, we had extended families. So if you
Yeah.
had a
Right.
1-year-old or a
Right.
6-month-old, mom was either living next door or was close enough to help you out.
Right.
But that isn't really the case anymore.
No, I moved 3,000 miles away from my whole family because I was ready to follow Rico anywhere. I thought we were going to travel everywhere. He
Yeah?
stayed with the Red Sox all those years.
That's true. That's pretty awesome.
But
though.
yeah, it is true. They do really help, and they've got wonderful girls working in there.
Yeah.
As
They're
counselors.
volunteers. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how many women you see come through the process, or?
I really don't know this year how many came through. I forget what she said now. We just heard that too. But I'm sure it was over 1,000 women.
Now, you think about this, the people at home have to understand this. This is a service being provided for by, say, 1,000 women a year. I don't know if you don't know if that's the exact number. And it's all voluntary.
And
Right.
You guys volunteer your services.
Yeah.
donations.
You get donations. I know our church donates to CareNet. People bring in food or baby clothes, products for the little
the
palookas, stuff like that.
We have a walk once a year, and we have a banquet. We earn from both of those, and a bottle drive, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It really is.
It must be, it's one of the few jobs you really get, it's not like being in Concord where the gratification level is can be pretty low.
I went to Concord 3 times for different bills that they were trying to get passed.
Yeah,
and I was like, I'm glad I'm not a representative.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult at times, you know. But yeah, so what other services do you provide, or because you had said you wanted a lot of stuff you wanted to cover tonight. Did you get everything
Well,
you wanted to?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I think
Everything?
so. I think so.
Everything? Well, you didn't tell me where you are in Manchester or Nashua.
Bridge Street, 50 Bridge Street.
Where's 50 Bridge Street?
It's down about 4 blocks that way.
You know,
It's north of here,
the Gerber,
No,
Gerber
no.
Dental Building.
I don't know where that is.
right next to public parking, the big public parking lot.
On Bridge Street, so you're not talking over the river, you're talking this side of the river.
Yes.
And you go 4 blocks.
No, you know when you turn onto Bridge Street where the bank is?
Yeah.
It's just the other side of the street. It's behind
The karate place.
behind that.
It's near that,
It's near
yes.
that. It's in
Okay,
that
so
building.
it's in that block.
It's in
not
that
4
building.
blocks.
Yes,
Okay,
right.
okay.
You're right, 3rd floor.
Yeah,
And
Sorry, my
the
eyes
center
messed
in
up.
Nashua is on 110
right.
Main Street.
right on
110
Main Street.
What are your hours?
That varies. That
It
changed
does vary,
recently,
and it
didn't
has changed.
It's on
and
the
I
net,
don't know
too.
what they are.
It's on the
Yes,
On the internet.
yes, it
Yeah.
is.
They can-
So if actually if there's a guy that's having trouble, also you could come down and talk to you.
They can call and ask for the healing, post-abortive healing. And I did want to mention, I've recently found out somebody very close to me had married, she had an abortion. She ended up marrying the young man. And right after the abortion, before they got married, right after
Yeah.
the abortion, he started abusing her. And they got married, and she was in an abusive relationship for a good 20 years. And I just found this out not too long ago. So my emphasis on you know, a man's heart, he took it out on her. His anger he took out on her. And that was directly related to this decision.
Really?
Yes, it was. So there's, you know, there are people that internalize it and bury it and do self-destructive things, but then there are people that react outwardly and do self-destructive things to others.
Well, there's actually kind of a cool sadistic experiment that I just think is one of the most delightful things I've ever heard. Was they took toddlers before they could really verbalize, and they put them in this room, okay? And then Mummy would walk out of the room, and they'd put a piece of plexiglass up so the toddler couldn't get to Mummy, and Mummy would go out of sight. Now, there's nothing bad about the room. There's toys and stuff like that. But invariably, the toddler would try to follow Mummy because it was a strange place, and they didn't want to be there without Mummy, like toddlers do. And what would happen is the little girl would come up and feel the plexiglass and realize that she couldn't do anything about it, and she would sit down and cry. What do the little boys do?
Throw something at the plexiglass.
They try to break it. They tried to
Of
break the
course.
glass, okay? And it's just the way they're wired. You can't at that early age you can't say that it's nature. It's a natural or nature versus nurture, but you can't say that it was social influences. It's just the way they're wired,
Right.
and I think that's what happens when you have these suppressed emotions or suppressed things in your past. A little girl is going to tend to be self-destructive, whether that's overeating, alcoholism, and things like that, whereas a boy is going to be aggressive. We were talking about post-traumatic stress, and the guy at church, when he first came back from World War II, everybody was so happy to see him. He's back from the war. He was on D-Day. He spent years, a long time over there, fighting the Germans, and they arranged to get him a job at the mill, the Amoskeag Mill. He said he was there for like a day, and he was sitting there at work, and somebody just came over to put his hand on his shoulder to, you know, to say welcome home, and he turned around and leveled them.
Whoa.
Okay? So it was just an instant reaction to a given situation because of the pent-up stress and everything else. Also because in war you have to learn to react very
Defense,
quickly or
right.
you're dead. But it's still the same kind of thing that you know, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there that are hearing this, hopefully tonight, or on the internet later on, you know, that they should call CareNet so that they can deal with these things, because it is self-destructive. And there is forgiveness through God and through prayer and meditation, and if you work it out. And I wanted to thank you, ladies, Elsie and Diane, for coming tonight, and I hope to see you again, and you guys are wonderful. Thank you for what you're
Very
doing.
welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, folks.